a young housemaid living quietly in the mansion of a powerful businessman. One day, while dusting the hallway, she notices an old photograph hanging on the wall. In the photo is her, at just 3 years old, standing beside her late mother. Why is that photo in his house? Who is he? A savior? Or the reason her mother died alone? From that moment on, she is no longer just a housemaid. She is the sole living witness to a truth buried for over 20 years. Before we begin, please like this video and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Your support gives us the strength to keep sharing powerful soul-stirring stories like this one. Let's begin. Amara Westbrook, 24 years old, worked as a housemaid in the estate of Sterling Hawthorne, the most powerful businessman in Ravensburg, praised widely as a symbol of compassion. But to Amara, there was no light in that place, only endless cold corridors and the silent echoes of a memory never touched. No one knew she had grown up in an orphanage. No one knew her mother, Dr. Evelyn Monroe, had died under mysterious circumstances when Amara was only 3. The death had been ruled natural, yet no complete forensic report was ever filed. No farewell. No one came forward to claim the body. Only little Amara, left behind with a borrowed surname and a question no one ever answered. The Hawthorne mansion was a strange place. Everything was so perfect, it felt unreal. Velvet-covered antique chairs, portraits larger than life, and books meticulously arranged on shelves. Books no one ever opened. Amara lived quietly in the servants' basement quarters, working silently, asking no questions, ensuring no one remembered her name. She didn't know why she had been chosen to work there. Her resume was unremarkable. Her experience modest. The manager had only said one thing: "Mr. Hawthorne doesn't like noisy people." And so Amara accepted it, as if it were fate. Every morning she brewed his tea exactly to his liking. Every night she wiped the window panes in silence, as wine-soaked parties played out behind the heavy wooden doors, polished laughter, footsteps vanishing past midnight, and the gaze of Sterling Hawthorne, cold, distant, never quite meeting hers. Amara once believed perhaps this was all her life would be an invisible worker in a world that never belonged to her. A forgotten girl, just as her mother had been forgotten. Until one afternoon, while dusting the East Wing corridor, a place rarely visited, she discovered something that changed everything. On a dark wooden wall, among ancient portraits, hung a small photo frame, half covered by dried leaves fallen from a decorative vase. Amara instinctively brushed away the thin layer of dust, and her heart nearly stopped. In the photo was herself, at age 3, standing beside a woman she could never forget. Her mother, Evelyn Monroe. That smile, that hair, those arms, unmistakable. That photo was inside Sterling Hawthorne's home. She stepped back. Her hands trembled. She couldn't make sense of it. Why? How? She stood frozen in the hallway, cold sweat running down her spine, and for the first time, this mansion was no longer just her workplace. It had become the starting point of a truth she had never dared to imagine. Amara stepped back from the photo as if it might burn her. A flood of questions surged through her. How could a man she had never met before have a picture of her and her mother? How could such a deeply personal moment exist in this house, among hundreds of carefully curated portraits, and remain unnoticed? And more importantly, why had he kept it? That night, Amara didn't sleep. She lay awake staring at the ceiling, the clanking of the old heater echoing like a suppressed heartbeat. In her mind, Evelyn's face returned. Not the woman in the photograph, but a patchwork of memory from a 3-year-old child. A cool necklace brushing her cheek while being cradled to sleep. A faint perfume lingering in hurried hugs. A gentle voice, always laced with exhaustion. And then, the flash of ambulance lights, the sound of adults crying, someone else's arms pulling her away. After that, the orphanage, and years of silence, years where no one asked her anything. The next morning, she returned to the sitting room, where the photo still rested, quietly unchanged, as if it hadn't shattered her entire world the night before. Sterling Hawthorne was entertaining a guest. an elderly senator booming about campaign funding. She moved carefully, pouring tea, head bowed low, but her eyes, they locked on the wooden frame nestled beside a row of law books, a silent piece of evidence no one ever acknowledged. As the guest finally departed, Sterling turned and looked at her. His silver-grey eyes hesitated, then gently gestured toward the photo. "You're wondering about that picture, aren't you?" Amara froze, a flicker of fear. Then she nodded. He walked over, glass of wine in hand, and stared at the photograph for a long, quiet moment. "Just an old acquaintance," he said softly. "A time that's long gone. Doesn't matter anymore." His tone was calm, too calm, but his eyes, when they glanced at her, didn't belong to a man casually recalling a photo. They belonged to someone burying something deep. Amara bowed politely, whispered a soft, "Yes, sir," and stepped out. But inside her, a storm had already begun. If she was just an old acquaintance, why keep the photo for over 20 years? If it truly meant nothing, why couldn't he look her in the eye when he said it? From that moment on, Amara knew. She could no longer live as she had before. She had to uncover the truth. Not just for her mother, but for herself. For the identity she had never been allowed to own. And like an unspoken vow, that night she unlocked her old phone and searched for a number she hadn't dialed in nearly a decade. Her hand trembled as she pressed call, but when the line connected, only one word left her lips. Choked, small but powerful enough to set everything in motion. "Aunt Clara." Clara's voice on the other end of the line trembled, just like Amara's hand holding the phone. "Amara, is it really you?" She didn't answer right away. Only the sound of her breath followed. "I found a photo of my mother. In his house." Silence. So long, Amara thought the call had dropped. Then Clara whispered, "It's the photo of you and your mother. At Clearwater Bay, isn't it?" Amara buried her face in a pillow, her throat closing. "So it's true. He knew my mother. He knew me. Then why did he leave us?" Clara didn't answer right away. She said they had to meet in person. Not over the phone, some truths you need to hear with your eyes. 3 days later, in a small cafe on the edge of Ravensburg's old quarter, Clara arrived. Her face bore the weight of age, but her eyes remained firm, like time had no power to dim the past. She took Amara's hand, looked into her eyes, and spoke bluntly. "You deserve to know, but prepare yourself. It won't be what you hoped." Amara nodded, and Clara began. Sterling Hawthorne had been Evelyn's first love, and her only one. They met in college, a man dreaming of politics, a woman hoping to open a community clinic. They had lived together, then Evelyn got pregnant. But Sterling didn't want the child. He didn't want a partner who would become a doctor for the poor. He left, silently, cruelly, without a word of goodbye. Evelyn raised her child alone. She worked as a doctor and as a mother. But her heart condition slowly worsened, and on that fateful day, she felt the pain. She called Sterling, begged him to help, to take her to the hospital. He came, but he only stood there, didn't drive her, didn't call for help. He just left, leaving Evelyn alone in that worn-down apartment where 3-year-old Amara lay asleep in the next room, hugging her pillow. Clara looked directly into Amara's eyes. "You don't remember, do you?" Amara shook her head. "But you used to call her name. You asked why she wouldn't wake up." Amara clenched her hands on her lap, fingers trembling, the pressure marking her skin. Why would he keep her photo? If he abandoned her like that? Clara sighed. Maybe guilt. Maybe it was his way of reminding himself. But whatever the reason, it doesn't erase what he did. Amara nodded, her eyes dry. No more tears. Only a chill sinking deep into her chest. She stood, walked away, and understood. That today, a fracture had opened, one no one could ever sew shut again. Amara didn't sleep. She sat alone in her small room at the end of the hallway, the one reserved for house staff in the Hawthorne estate. Cold white walls, the ticking of the clock, a dim yellow light. Everything felt like it was pressing against her thoughts. In her hands was the document Clara had left behind, a copy of Dr. Evelyn Monroe's death certificate. Amara read it again and again, as if she might find a crack in the script of fate. Cause of death: cardiac arrest, no emergency care administered. Time of death registration: 9:13 p.m. Reporting individual: unknown. There was no mention of Sterling Hawthorne, no home address, no listed witness, as if her mother had never existed. A silence carefully composed. That evening, Joan Radcliffe, the private investigator Clara had once hired, appeared without ceremony. She didn't greet Amara. She simply placed an old folder on the kitchen counter. You have a right to know more. But you also have to accept the truth that no one may come to help you. Amara flipped through the pages. Medical records from Evelyn's former clinic, removed from the system in 2003, right after her death. Records from the hospital Evelyn was supposed to have been taken to, empty. No name, no admittance, no trace. Only one document remained, a faded fax, ink-smeared, handwritten across the top. Patient called private taxi, did not arrive at ER. Signed in blue pen, RH. Joan looked at Amara, eyes cold and steady. RH could be anyone. But based on what Clara told you, you already know who it is. Amara clenched the folder, nails digging into her palms. She didn't want to believe it. But the deeper she dug, the clearer it became. Sterling hadn't just abandoned Evelyn. He had constructed a false reality. One that erased every trace, silenced every voice, even the one belonging to a woman who had saved hundreds of lives. Amara stood up without a word. She walked to the Grand Library, where Sterling often entertained powerful guests. High on the top shelf, a logbook detailing medical grants from the Hawthorne Foundation. She reached for it. Her fingers had just brushed the edge of the spine, when a knock echoed behind her. Sterling. It's late, he said calmly. What are you doing in here? Amara turned, keeping her composure. Dusting. He nodded slightly, stepping inside. His eyes scanned the shelves, then paused on her hand. Don't let old things lead you astray, he said, voice low and smooth. Some things are better left untouched. Amara bowed her head gently. But in her heart, a truth whispered louder than ever. No one can erase the truth forever. One midweek morning, as Amara brought coffee up to Sterling's office, his personal secretary was sorting through a stack of faxed sponsorship documents. Mr. Hawthorne wants this file stored separately. Not for media release, she said without looking up. For a brief moment, unnoticed, Amara's eyes caught the title on the top page, Community Project, in memory of Evelyn Monroe. Evelyn Monroe, her mother's name, now paired with the logo of the Hawthorne Legacy Foundation. Amara kept her face calm, but a blade of ice slashed through her chest. Back in her room, she accessed the old staff computer in the storage closet, once used by the housekeeper to manage cleaning schedules. Line by line, data filled the screen. The Hawthorne Foundation had launched over 10 fundraising campaigns in Evelyn's name, with slogans like, continuing the legacy of an angel in medicine. Every child deserves a mother like Evelyn. The first campaign began. Just 1 month after Evelyn's death. Amara's throat tightened. Not a candle lit, not a single apology. He had turned her death into a marketing tool, boosting his public image, expanding his influence, drawing in donations. With help from Joan Radcliffe, Amara obtained internal financial records from a media partner. One 2015 campaign alone raised over $12 million through orphan care initiatives. But most of the money flowed into vague consulting centers no one had ever heard of. Amara printed the entire report. Across the top, a bold red-inked header, reference the legacy of Dr. Evelyn Monroe, the woman who inspired Sterling Hawthorne. For the first time, Amara no longer had doubts. He hadn't just abandoned the woman he once claimed to love. He had built an empire of virtue atop her death. That night in her room, Amara stared into the mirror. She no longer saw a quiet, obedient housemaid. She saw the last living person who carried Evelyn's true name. And she knew. She would reclaim her mother's voice, not with a scream, But with the truth, Sterling Hawthorne didn't age the way most powerful men did. His silver hair was always perfectly trimmed, his suits immaculate. Every step he took was a performance in control and prestige. But one thing had changed. His eyes. Lately they weren't cold. They were watchful. And Amara felt it. That morning, as she poured his tea like she always did, Sterling suddenly lowered his newspaper and looked straight at her. "Where did you say you were from?" His tone was casual, like asking about the weather. "Hope Haven Orphanage. I was hired 2 years ago." She replied, her eyes focused on the tray in her hands. He nodded, but his gaze didn't move from her face. "Anyone in your family ever work in medicine?" Amara paused for one brief second, then shook her head. It was just a moment, but she knew. He smelled the lie. That night, she discovered the employee records cabinet had been locked, though it had always been left open before. The next morning, the head butler whispered, "Mr. Hawthorne ordered background checks on all staff." Then Joan Radcliffe called. "My brother works at the Archive Bureau. Someone just pulled the adoption file for the name Westbrook." Odds are it was Sterling. At the same time, a message appeared on Amara's phone. An unknown number. "You're playing with fire. Be careful who sleeps under the same roof." A chill ran down her spine. It wasn't just her mother's past being exhumed anymore. She herself was now in the crosshairs. And then came something worse. One day, while tidying Sterling's office, she saw a letter left on the desk. An unsealed envelope. Inside was a photo of her, standing outside Leo's bar, where she sometimes worked nights. A voice in her head whispered, "He knows." But what chilled her even more was a growing realization Sterling Hawthorne wasn't just a man with a dark past. He was a master actor, someone who had worn the mask of benevolence for so long that no one could tell where the role ended and the truth began. And now Amara was living at the center of his stage, caught between being a housemaid and an unacknowledged daughter. The Hollow Oak sat at the heart of Ravensburg, a bar where the rich drank like the poor and where big secrets often melted into the clink of ice. Leo Granger worked there, a former Special Forces operative, quiet, discreet, polite but never friendly, a man who'd seen enough blood to recognize the tremble hidden behind a composed face. That night, Amara dropped by as usual. She didn't speak, but the worry in her eyes was impossible to miss. Leo placed a glass of water in front of her, but instead of walking away, he sat down across from her. "You're being watched." He said it plainly, no questions, no preamble. Amara froze. "I know because the man following you is the same one who followed me 3 years ago, back when I left the special training program, and refused to become Sterling Hawthorne's personal bodyguard." Silence. Leo rolled up his sleeve, revealing a faint scar. He doesn't like being refused, and he really doesn't like people who know too much and live too long. Amara swallowed hard. Leo continued, "I overheard him once, drunk, late at night, talking on the phone about Evelyn, called her a sweet mistake, said it was time to let go of that burden." Air left Amara's lungs like a punch to the chest. Leo reached into his pocket and pulled out a small USB drive. "I don't know what's going on between you and him, but I've kept this in case the day ever came to tear down the stage these fake saints built." He locked eyes with her, voice low. "Whatever reason you have for risking yourself, just make sure it doesn't turn you into another Evelyn." Amara clutched the USB tightly in her hand. For the first time, she wasn't alone. And for the first time, she realized the truth she carried could destroy lives, if it fell into the wrong hands. Amara arrived at Clara Monroe's apartment on a Saturday afternoon. She didn't call ahead. When her aunt opened the door, she was startled by the pale face of the girl standing before her. Amara didn't need many words. She simply said, "I need to know why my mother died." Clara fell silent. Then she led Amara into the living room and pulled out an old music box from a dark wooden cabinet. It was oval-shaped, etched with faded green-bronze floral patterns. A family heirloom from when Evelyn was just a little girl. Clara placed her hand on the lid. This Evelyn sent it to me a few weeks before she died. At the time, I didn't understand why, especially not me, the one she once resented. But now I know. She sent it because I wouldn't destroy it. Amara opened the lid. A gentle lullaby began to play, a melody she'd heard before in dreams. Then, the music faded and a voice replaced it. Hoarse, tired, like someone running out of breath. If someone's hearing this, I may not have much time left. Sterling, he knows I'm collapsing, but he won't call for help. I begged him. I said I needed a hospital. He looked at me, then turned away. Evelyn's voice broke, trembling like a blade slicing skin. I don't know if anyone will believe me, but if Amara hears this, you are the most beautiful thing I've ever had. Don't let them use you. Don't let hatred devour your heart. Amara broke down in tears. She collapsed beside the music box, her hands trembling uncontrollably. There was no longer room for doubt. Sterling Hawthorne hadn't just abandoned Evelyn. He stood and watched her die. For calculation, for reputation, for ambition, no gunshot. But it was still a murder, with ice in place of blood, and now she was the only one left, carrying her mother's voice, to tell the world that. Evelyn Monroe was never truly silent. That night, Amara didn't return to the Hawthorne estate. She sat alone in the rundown room where Leo Granger once lived after retiring from the military. An old laptop sat in front of her. On the screen, an email window already addressed to peregrine.shadow@onmail.cc. Attached files, Evelyn Monroe record.mp3. Hawthorne Foundation money laundering map.pdf. Leo walked in and saw Amara frozen in place. He didn't speak. He just glanced at the screen, then exhaled softly. You know who they are. If you hit send, Sterling won't live to see the sunrise. Amara didn't turn around. Her voice was hoarse. Do you know what it feels like? Hearing your mother beg at the edge of life and death. Do you know? He stood there, just 1911 call away from saving her. And he walked away. Leo remained silent. Amara raised her hand. Her finger hovered over the send button. Just one click. No courts, no press, no lengthy trials. Just the debt, paid in full. A justice that needed no laws, only darkness, with a name to swallow. But in that moment, a voice echoed in her mind. A line from the recording, "Don't let hatred consume your heart." She pulled her hand back, bit her lip until it bled. Leo stepped forward and placed a hand on her shoulder. Forgiveness isn't about him deserving it. It's about you, not carrying the same chains he wore. Tears spilled from Amara's eyes. She deleted the email, shut the laptop, and for the first time in years, she felt not at peace, but grounded. She was not a killer, not an instrument of vengeance. She was Amara Westbrook, daughter of Evelyn Monroe. And she would finish this story with light, not blood. Just 3 days before the gala, Amara was printing copies of documents at a small suburban shop when her phone began to buzz violently. Joan Radcliffe's name lit up the screen. But the voice on the other end wasn't familiar, only ragged breathing. Then silence. She called back, no signal. At that exact moment, Leo burst through the door, pale as a ghost. We've been exposed. Amara's laptop, the one at Leo's place, had been destroyed. The hard drive, missing. The backup USB she'd hidden in the attic, gone. She raced back to the estate, trying to log into her cloud archive. The screen flashed a chilling message. Access revoked. Files encrypted. Contact administrator. An anonymous email appeared, along with a simple, ominous message. Choose disappear, or be buried with your mother. She collapsed onto the floor. All the files, the papers, the subtitled recording, the list of fake charity grants, the account statements had been erased from every platform. Nothing remained in her hands. She called Clara. Number unavailable. Texted Joan again. No reply. That night, anonymous leaks began surfacing on news blogs. A housemaid claiming to be Sterling Hawthorne's illegitimate daughter has been caught threatening a charity foundation and forging identity documents. Amara knew this move, Sterling's signature attack. He didn't stab from the front. He made the world turn its back until you collapsed on your own. Leo suggested retreat. We could leave Ravensburg, start over. But Amara shook her head. I'm not Evelyn Monroe's daughter just to run when dawn is this close. If he's backed me into a wall, I'll turn that wall into a projection screen, right in the middle of his gala. She had no documents left, no recordings, no transcripts. But she still had memory. She still had the truth. And she still had that old music box, holding the one voice Sterling could never erase. The banquet hall of the Langford Regency Hotel shimmered under a canopy of lights. It was the annual gala of the Hawthorne Legacy Foundation, a prestigious event where the Ravensburg elite gathered and where Sterling Hawthorne stood as the gravitational center of the universe. He stepped onto the stage in a deep-toned tuxedo, his silver hair meticulously combed and styled, a smile that masked the past, a voice warm enough to muffle the blood behind it. We are here tonight, he began, to honor those who have served the community. And this year I would like to announce a new scholarship, named after the woman who inspired me, Evelyn Monroe. Applause erupted. Right at that moment, the main lights suddenly cut out. A cold, metallic darkness swept across the room. Then, from the middle of the ballroom, a woman's voice rang out, clear, steady, but trembling with truth. Evelyn Monroe was not a symbol. She was a human being. And you let her die. Heads turned, a young woman in a black dress walked slowly toward the stage. No jewelry, no name tag. She didn't belong to their world. But her gaze made the entire room hold its breath. Amara Westbrook. She stepped onto the podium. No one stopped her. No one even understood yet. She stood beside Sterling, stared straight into his face, and turned on a music box. A lullaby began to play, then faded. And in its place, a woman's voice, weak, broken, as if fighting for her last breath. Sterling, I can't breathe. Please, don't leave me here. Cut off. Silence. Amara pulled out an old photograph. She held it up under the spotlights. This is me, 3 years old. Next to my mother, Dr. Evelyn Monroe. You hung this picture on your wall as if it were a trophy. But it's proof of the crime you've kept silent about for 2 decades. The ballroom trembled, cameras clicked wildly. Sterling stood frozen, speechless. Amara scanned the room. Her voice shook, but her words were clear. I'm not asking you to believe me out of sympathy. Believe me because it's the truth. My mother doesn't need a monument. She needs her voice returned. Sterling Hawthorne had never been looked at like that before. Amara's gaze wasn't just the look of a girl. It was a living indictment, an accusation that needed no courtroom. She placed a thick folder on the podium. Inside were a birth certificate, clearly stating Amara Monroe, only daughter of Evelyn Monroe. The original death certificate, with a forged signature and falsified verification stamps. A photograph of Evelyn collapsed in the emergency room, alone, no one by her side. A video from Clara Monroe, sent from her hiding place. Sterling let my sister die. I am the last living witness, and I will be silent no longer. The projector cast a sequence of images across the big screen. Evelyn, young and bright. Evelyn, working at the community hospital. Evelyn, pregnant. Evelyn holding her child. Amara pointed to one photo. That's me, and I never died. Like you told the world. I grew up in an orphanage, never knowing why my mother disappeared, while you accepted awards and raised charity funds on the pain you created. The entire ballroom fell into dead silence. Some guests reached for their phones. Others quietly left their seats, heading for the exits. But Amara didn't stop. She bent down and pulled something small from her coat pocket. A silver hairpin, the one Evelyn used to clip her daughter's hair when she was just 3. My mother doesn't need you to build her a statue. She needs to be seen. And today, I bring her back. Her voice trembled, but she didn't shed a single tear. Sterling Hawthorne stood motionless. His hands gripped the edges of the podium. No one stepped forward to defend him, no more applause, only camera lenses zooming in, capturing a man falling apart. Amara stepped down. For the first time, she was no longer the silent maid in the halls of Hawthorne Manor. She was the rightful heir to a truth long stolen, and she had just reclaimed it before the entire world. 3 hours after the gala, the news swept across Ravensburg like a flood. Front-page headlines screamed, "Evelyn Monroe's secret daughter exposes Sterling Hawthorne at charity gala." Sterling Hawthorne accused of exploiting the image of the deceased for personal gain. Top donors withdrew funding en masse. Law firms began issuing subpoenas for the records of the Hawthorne Legacy Foundation. The board of directors went into panic mode. One internal email was leaked. "We may face prosecution for misuse of charitable records. Legal counsel is requested immediately." Sterling vanished from the media. Reporters camped outside the mansion. His spokesperson announced, "Mr. Hawthorne is considering legal action for defamation." But no one believed it. Because in the viral video from the gala, it was clear. No one accused him. The evidence did. A week later, police announced a preliminary investigation into criminal neglect leading to death in connection with Dr. Evelyn Monroe's passing. A local TV station aired an old interview. Sterling once choked up while recounting a soulmate lost to a cruel illness. Now, with the same footage, viewers saw only coldness in the eyes of a man who knew. He had let that woman die. The portraits of Evelyn once hanging in the Hawthorne Foundation headquarters were taken down. On the glass of the front gates, someone had scrawled in black ink, "Light is not meant to be exploited. It is meant to be lived." Amara stood at a distance, watching the empire that had once buried her mother's death now crumble into absolute silence. And she didn't smile, because this was not a victory. This was simply truth, finally allowed to exist. 6 months after the truth was laid bare, Ravensburg changed, quietly. The Hawthorne mansion was sold. Traces of the old regime slowly vanished from the press and from the public's memory. But in a rundown riverside building, the very community clinic Evelyn Monroe once built, the lights came back on. A new sign stood outside, simple yet proud, "The Evelyn Project," where forgotten voices are heard again. Amara Westbrook was no longer a housemaid. She was the founder, and the one who rightfully tied her mother's name to justice. The foundation now supported single mothers, abandoned children, and survivors of abuse. It had offices, a volunteer staff, and a legal aid network backed by Joan Radcliffe and Leo Granger. Leo became head of security and witness protection. He didn't speak much, but he was always there, especially when Amara felt exhausted. Joan, as sharp as ever, said at the press launch, "We're not here to change the world overnight. We're here to protect those who were once forced to stay silent." Clara Monroe, now publicly acknowledged as Amara's aunt, embraced her tightly at the opening ceremony. She placed a hand on Amara's shoulder, her voice choked. "If your mother were still here, she'd be so proud." Amara simply nodded, because she knew it. No one had to say it. That evening, after the room had emptied, Amara stood before a large portrait of Evelyn on the wall. In the photo, her mother was smiling. Not for anyone, not for anything. Just because she was herself. Amara whispered, "I didn't avenge you, Mom. I just said the words you never got the chance to finish." A small candle was lit beneath the portrait. Not for mourning, but to light the path ahead. An October afternoon, Ravensburg Cemetery stood silent as stone, the wind gently rustling the bare branches above. Amara stood alone, in front of a gravestone engraved with the words, "Dr. Evelyn Monroe, 1969 to 2001. She tried to heal the world before it was ready." In her hands was a bouquet of white chrysanthemums, her mother's favorite flower, a flower that didn't wait for approval to bloom. She placed the bouquet down and stood in silence for a long while. Then, as if speaking to herself, Amara said softly, "I used to think I had to destroy him so you could rest in peace. But the truth is, you never needed revenge. You needed to be remembered right." There was no longer anger in Amara's eyes, only sorrow, the kind that had learned how to let go. Sterling Hawthorne doesn't deserve forgiveness. But I'm not living to get back at him anymore. I'm living to keep your name shining. A ray of sunlight broke through the clouds, landing gently on the stone. Amara turned away, stepping lightly from the ground that had once bound her childhood. For the first time in her life, her heart felt weightless, not because justice had been served, but because she had made peace with the past. By choosing not to become what he was, she had chosen light, and that light didn't need to be forgiven. It only needed to continue. Outro, the light that never spoke, but never left. Some truths don't need to scream to be heard. Some justice doesn't need a courtroom to exist. And some people, like Amara Westbrook, don't wait to be given power. They build it themselves. From the shattered pieces of a forgotten childhood, she didn't bring down Sterling Hawthorne with fury. She didn't need a fairy tale ending either. What she left behind was a light kindled by her mother's courage, by her choice not to seek revenge, and by a belief that the past doesn't define us. It's how we face it that shapes who we are. If someone were to ask her, "Why did you forgive?" Amara would simply smile. "I didn't forgive him. I forgave myself." To keep living, no longer carrying the shadow of someone who walked away. And that was enough. Because light never needs to be forgiven. It only needs to keep shining. Through those brave enough not to become the darkness,